Hey, this is Richard Chansey, and I am so excited that you're taking a little bit of time to spend with me on this training today. Today, I'm going to share with you how I sold more than $12 million of consulting, coaching, and online training using automated webinars without being what I call technical. Just so you know what we're up to, we're going to be together about 60 or 65 minutes today. And if you don't have a pen and paper, I promise you're going to need one because I'm going to cover a lot of ground and you're going to learn a ton today. My goal in this webinar is to show you a new way, to show you a better way to 10x your lead generation and sales. I'm going to be walking through a step-by-step automated webinar funnel. It's just like the one I use to generate traffic, leads, and ultimately sales, and you can do the same things. What makes this different than any other training you've been a part of? It's simply this: automation. We're going to talk about how to automate your sales funnel versus just developing your sales skills. If you stay to the end, I'm going to walk you through 2 simple steps I added to my sales funnel that instantly led to more sales and less tension in my sales process. Now, this is a simple adjustment you can start using today, right after you get off this call, to get more clients. It's a part of the automated process I'm going to show you today, but you can also do it manually and it'll work because I did it that way for a long period of time. Before I get into the training, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm qualified to have this conversation. So that's a picture of my family. That's my wife, Christy, in the middle, and my daughter, Jordan, there on the right. The reason I use this particular picture, this is my family at the Griffith Observatory with Los Angeles in the background. We're at the end of a 10-day vacation that started in San Francisco and ended up in LA. The reason it's significant, though, is because it was the first vacation I'd ever taken where work didn't fully consume my waking hours. Once you've had that experience, you want everyone else to have it as well. And it's all because of what we're going to talk about today. I own a business that helps companies monetize their sales funnel. That means what I'm talking to you about today is what I talk to people about every day. I graduated from the prestigious Valdosta State University. Now, I don't say that to impress you or to disparage this great institution. What I want to convince you of during this training is that you can do what I have done. I wouldn't consider myself technical when I started this whole process. I didn't have wealthy parents or any other advantage you don't have. And I was, and I still am, good at selling because I care about the people I'm serving. If I have a superpower, that's the only one that I have. I tell people she's been married to 5 different men over the years, and they're all me because I've sold just about everything you can imagine. Now, here's a revelation for you. My teenage daughter actually likes me. In fact, we have breakfast every Tuesday morning at her request. I used to be gone every week. Now, because of what I'm about to share with you, I get to determine what my days look like, and you can do it too. And as it turns out, our kids actually want us around. Now, here's my disclaimer for everything you're going to learn today. My results are not typical. Nothing I'm going to talk about today should be taken as a guarantee that you'll make boatloads of sales or, for that matter, make any additional sales at all. I'll share my experience and let you decide if you can make this process work for you. How's that work? Great. So after selling for 15 years, I finally realized a couple of things. First, cold calling for business meant I was starting literally at the farthest point possible from making a sale. I also realized that every day started the same way. I was grinding. In fact, I really had 2 jobs, a sales job and a consulting job. And I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. By the way, that picture, that's me standing on stage at the Live to Lead simulcast conference put on by John Maxwell's company here in Atlanta. Guess what I'm doing? That's right, I'm selling something. I brought them an idea and they asked me to run with it. You know why I could do that? Because of the skills we're talking about today that I developed in this process of building and selling using webinars. Now, I've done a lot of things right and I have done even more things wrong. Today, we're going to talk about my 3 secrets you need to know to sell high-ticket items using webinars. So let's talk about secret number 1, why automation is 10x more effective than selling skills. What I'm about to share with you flies in the face of every book you've ever read on selling. But let's talk about why automation is just plain and simply better than developing your sales skills, and why everything you know about selling probably isn't true anymore because of automation. Sales skills are incremental. That means if you work really hard, you can add a few more sales to your business every year. But automation is exponential. Working at it will multiply your efforts because the automated funnel is doing the heavy lifting. In fact, I don't know if you've ever had to change a tire on your car, but if you get a flat, you pull over to the side of the road and you don't have a jack in the back of the car, my friend, you ain't about to change a tire. Here's what that means. The jack does the heavy lifting. With less effort, you can lift a whole lot more. And that's the way automation in your business works. So let me ask you this. Would you rather have incremental growth or exponential growth? That's the insanity question. If the answer is incremental growth, you might be in the wrong place today. Sales skills require time. You've got to work on the skill or just plain out grind. Most of my career was comprised of picking up a phone and calling people that didn't want to hear from me. I had to put time on that every day to keep the top of my funnel full. How many of us are tired of the day-to-day grind? Well, automation compounds time. Today, I can make 100 phone calls, or I can build an automated webinar so that in the future, when I make another 100 calls, my webinar is at work educating people through my sales process. Now, wouldn't you rather be compounding time than just simply spending it? Your sales skills only work when you do. If you take a vacation, my friend, those sales skills are going on vacation with you. Automation works without you. Right now, I have 17 webinars running 3 times a day. Most of them are at least an hour in length. Here's what that means. I'll do 51 hours of teaching today. In one 24-hour period, I will do 51 hours of training. Automation compounds time, but it also creates time. I have in my notes here to pause for dramatic effect. And there you go. Now think about this. How would it feel to have a funnel that's generating new leads and sales for your business? Let me just answer that question for you. It's awesome. It is incredible. It's a game changer. Now, I'm not telling you not to get better at selling. In fact, I believe selling is something that we do for people, not to them. So we owe it to our company, our prospects, and ourselves to always be growing in the way that we connect our value proposition with our contacts. All I'm trying to show you today is how to do a whole lot more of that connecting without the constant funnel stress. Because here's a fact. You're going to sell more if you're less stressed about selling more. Do you believe that? I mean, can you get your mind around that? Your income is going to go way up too. It's basic supply and demand. If the time you have to serve your clients is finite and you add a bunch more people who want to do business with you to the top of your funnel, your day rate, it's going up, my friend. Okay, let's talk about secret number 2, the scalable webinar funnel. This is where you're going to want to take some notes, I promise. So this is what the funnel looks like in its entirety. We're going to actually break this down step by step so you can look and see what this is supposed to be when you get done with it. So let's dive into the first part here. On the left, we've got email, paid ads, traditional sources, and organic. So let's run these down one by one. Email, those are the people we're going to send invitations to our webinars. So that's simply putting together an invitation sequence and sending it out to people that are already on your list. If you don't have a list, you will soon as you start to run webinars. That's where most of my lists have come from. In fact, most of those lists were built using paid ads, which is the second category. This has been the bulk of the way we've built the email list. Currently, we have about 42,000 people on our email list. We've generated a little more than 120,000 people on our email list. Now, keep in mind, in the space that we're selling into with digital products, there's only about 300,000 people in that whole audience. And over the years, we've generated 120,000 email addresses from them. But we really do try to get people off our list quickly. If we know that they're not going to open the emails or they're not going to buy, we hit the eject button on them. Traditional sources, for most of us that are selling, that can mean things like networking, going to conferences, leads that your company generates. And yes, you can drive all of those people into an offer to join your webinar. And then organic are people that find you on the web. Now for us, this is gravy. We've got a strategy for organic traffic, but it really is a byproduct of everything else that we're doing. We don't actually spend money on the organic part of it, hiring people to come in and do that for us. The next phase in the funnel is the opt-in. Now, here's the big thing about the opt-in. This is where the transfer of value happens the first time. I'm going to give you something valuable, meaning I'm going to show you this training for free most of the time, and you're going to give me the opportunity to follow up by way of a first name and an email address. Now, there are some tricks of the trade here when you're dealing with an opt-in page. You got to play around with it for maximum effectiveness. Things like the name of your webinar and whether or not you put a video on this page talking about your webinar. Those things tend to add to or actually detract from your opt-in rate. You just got to test them a little bit. You're looking for about a 12 to 20% opt-in rate here. By the way, I put videos on all of our opt-in pages for the most part. Now, you want to keep in mind too, that although the webinar may be free, there is still a cost in terms of time. So you really have to build the value on this page to get people to take that next step. After that, we're going to send them to a thank you page. Now we're going to come back to this page in just a few minutes and I'll show you one of the biggest revelations I've had in running webinars. So just hang on for a minute and I'll show you that when we get to the end of this section. Next are our confirmation and reminders. In these emails, you want to do something called indoctrination. That means adding value to your prospects in some way that allows them to develop an affinity for you and your training. That means you want them to start liking you is basically what it means. It really does get them ready to show up, prepare to learn, and ultimately move forward with you with your call to action in your training. Then there's the actual webinar. Now we're shooting for a goal of having 40% of the people that register for the webinar actually show up for it. The good news is that begins to weed out some of the people who aren't really serious. And by the way, we're going to give them another shot or two at it if they don't show up, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Now, the next step from the webinar might be an order form, or it could be a link for them to set up a phone call with you. Or as I'm going to show you, if you stay till the end of the webinar, it could be a two-step process that's going to help you get your foot way in the door. Regardless, whatever your next step is, you have to have a single and very clear call to action that's focused on the benefit of the next step to your prospect. Don't miss that. It has to be beneficial to them. Here's why. Nobody wants to get on the phone with me so I can sell them something. And believe me, they don't want to get on the phone with you so you can sell them something either. But they might want to know how I can help them monetize the top of their sales funnel and make money while they're generating leads. Hopefully you get the difference, right? Nobody wants to do a phone call or a Zoom call with you. They want to have a solution to their problem. After that, you've got your post-webinar sequences. The people that don't show up, you can send them right back to your offer, or you can send them back to the webinar registration page. Some people like to offer an instant replay of their webinar right here. Now for attendees, you want to send them reminders of the offer. Sometimes we put a countdown timer on a sales page and the order form too. About half of our sales come in the 3 days following in the webinar. So it's super important that you have a solid follow-up system. The next step is to think about what happens after your webinar cycle is done. What do you do with the leads? Sometimes we'll wait 10 days and then send them through a 4-day email sequence with a variation of the offer that we made in the webinar to take the next step. That's all automated, of course. With buyers, you're going to want to come up with a way to map out your customer journey. I'm going to show you mine at the end of this training, so make sure you hang in there for that. Let's circle back now to this thank you page. I put on the notes here, this literally changed everything for me. Years after I started doing webinars, I bought a course on online marketing that I paid $4,500 for. A few minutes into the second video, the guy introduced the idea of a one-time offer. I can't remember if that's what he called it or not, but he said to make an offer on the thank you page when people register for your webinar. So I closed the course and went and built one. It's a $47 product called Church Video Black Box. Was selling that to pastors. It took me a day and a half to create it. And for the next year and a half, that $47 product almost completely covered my paid marketing budget. That was a few years ago now, and we've sold nearly 2,000 units of that with no money spent on marketing or advertising. All we did was offer it on the thank you page when people registered for a webinar. That's what you call a self-liquidating lead. Now, Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Right here on your thank you page is definitely a place you want to take a shot. All right, now we're at secret number 3, webinars that get people to take action. How many of you want to create a webinar that actually gets people to do something? For most of my career, I absolutely sucked at understanding one key selling principle. And here's that principle. The point is always to get people to take the next step. If you're selling a $5,000 coaching gig or a multi-million-dollar consulting agreement, you're not going to close that deal on a webinar. That's like asking a woman to marry you in the first 10 minutes of date number 1. Ladies, that's like starting to talk about babies on that first date for you. The same holds true for selling on a webinar. You have to respect the process. Get people to take the next step, and I promise you'll be amazed. In fact, at every step in your funnel, the goal should be just to get people to take the next step. Now, that might be opting into your mailing list, setting up a phone call, or buying an online course. And again, I did this entirely wrong for most of my career. Instead of asking people to take the next step, I asked them to take all the steps. I was closing hard with no respect for the process a buyer's got to go through in order to take the next step and buy from you. A thing you've got to understand is that every prospect you have, they know where they are and they have an idea about where they want to be. Your job is to demonstrate a process that helps them walk that path. My first webinar was called The 7 Deadly Sins of Church Construction, and that webinar was the first step. I said, come watch this webinar and let me terrify you of everything that can and often does go wrong for a church during construction. Now, in the webinar, my step number 2 was a 30-day engagement. I'm going to talk about that more at the end of the training today. Step number 3 was during that 30-day engagement, I'm going to push them to a 2-day on-site strategy session. And during that strategy session, I'd offer them the full consulting at $50,000 to $100,000 or $150,000. That was a percentage of our total construction price. $50,000 was the minimum the first check could be. So again, the very first step in the sales process was generating leads through the webinar. Now what I want to do is take a few minutes and walk you through what that webinar structure needs to look like to get people to take action and take that next step. Okay, this is the automatic webinar formula. So before we dive in and go through all the steps of what your webinar structure needs to look like, I want to dive in a little bit and talk about how you need to understand your ideal client. So here's a couple things you need to know before you start to plan your webinar. You need to know who your ideal client is. Now there's a difference between who you'll serve and who you're going to target. The serve group obviously is a lot bigger. The target group is when I start running ads and putting messages together, my avatar is the person that I have in mind. So my ideal avatar or attendee for this training is a 40-year-old man who's making 6 figures consulting, coaching, or in a speaking business. He's got 2 kids, a wife of 15 years, and he's a Christian. Now, let me pause right there and say, the reason I put that last part in as a Christian is because I am one. The people that are going to resonate most with my message are the 1.0 version of me, if I'm 2.0. So I get super detailed on that. I get super detailed on the target that I'm after, and the demographic includes a faith-based part of it. That's just part of who my ideal avatar is. Now, here's what that doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that I won't go out and serve every single person that I can with this training, because I believe that what I'm teaching you today will absolutely make you better at life, and it'll make your life better. So I will serve people outside of this target, but when I'm going to market looking for a crowd, that is my crowd. Now, my second avatar is a woman with very similar criteria. I feel like I can serve them too, but here's a shocker. I've never been one. Women are not a 1.0 version of me. Their motivations may be slightly different than mine. Doesn't mean I won't serve them. I do have an avatar that we target with that. The messaging can be different in that space, but primarily I'm going after people that are where I was, that want to be where I am. Let me say that again. I am going after the 1.0 version of myself. And if I'm 2.0 now, I'm trying to find people that are where I was, that want to be where I am. Okay. That narrows the focus a lot, and niching down, you're going to find, is a tremendous value as you walk through this process. As I'm building out those avatars, I'm going to deep dive into a few things. What do they fear? What objections do they have about moving forward? What's holding them back? What are their hopes and dreams? So I'm developing this avatar long before I even think about starting to build my webinar. And by the way, if it's my 10th webinar to this same audience, I'm still reviewing and updating these avatars. So it feels like I'm actually teaching somebody that I know, that I'm having a one-on-one conversation with somebody that I know, like, and trust, and I want to help them get to that 2.0 level. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the webinar structure. I'm going to start by giving you the 7 stages of a webinar. The first thing is the welcome. Then you've got indoctrination. We've talked about indoctrination in some other places in the webinar today. We're going to dive into how you do that inside of your webinar. 3 is the webinar content. 4 is the offer stack, where you're going to make your offer and do some risk reversal. Then you've got the hook, the Q&A, and then the recap. Okay, so let's dive in and talk about the welcome stage. Inside the welcome stage, you want to do a couple of things. If you're doing the webinar live, you want to set expectations for how long the webinar is going to last, and you want to do it right on the front end. The reason you want to do that, and again, this goes back to knowing my avatar of men. Anytime we sit down to watch somebody to teach anything, the first thing we think is, I wonder how long this is going to last. So you want to set expectations for how long the webinar is actually going to last. The next thing you want to do is set them up. So you'll notice in the beginning of this webinar, I said, make sure you grab a pen and paper. Hopefully by now you realize I wasn't lying, that you actually need a pen and paper to be able to follow along and take some notes, because hopefully I'm delivering some great content here. You're also going to want to make a big promise in the beginning. You want to tell people what they'll get from this training. For example, the goal of this training was to show you the impact an automated webinar can have on your funnel, on your business, and really on your life, and to convince you that you can do it. And by the way, hopefully by now you're realizing if this guy, Richard, can do it, I can do it. I always think if one person can do it, many people can do it. Then you want to have a hook. So what is a hook? Well, you want to give people a reason to stay till the end of the webinar. In most of my webinars, I try to pack great content all the way through, including at the end. And a lot of times the end is the culmination of everything we've talked about today. So in this webinar, for example, I've been telling you, if you stay till the end, I'll teach you, or you'll learn these 2 steps you can add to your sales funnel right now, even without a webinar, that are going to help you win more business. So you want to create that hook, and then you want to pepper it throughout. You don't want to overdo it, which, thinking about it now, I might have overdone this in this training. But let me just tell you, the stuff I'm going to talk about at the end of this training, you definitely want to hang around for. And there, I did it again. I overdid it again. The next thing you want to do is what I call time traveling. So this is to get you in the frame of mind where you are thinking about what your customer is thinking about, what your prospect is thinking about, their desirable future. Now, here's what you need to know. For most of us, we are so wrapped in what's going on right now in the moment that we don't think about the future. Time traveling allows you to get people to think about what's absolutely coming down the road. They are can you imagine statements. You want to paint a picture for people of a desirable or an undesirable future. So let me give you a couple of examples. Imagine what your life would be like if you had a steady stream of high quality leads you could get on the phone with every single day. In fact, all you've got to do is pick up the phone and get on the Zoom call, or they're calling you. Now, instead of selling, you're consulting with salespeople. So think about what that looks like. You wake up on a Thursday morning and you've got people stacked in all day long that have signed up after a webinar because they want to talk to you because you are the expert in your space. That sounds pretty good, right? Now, the negative example of the way that you do that is you can move in the other direction. You can talk about, and this is a real thing that's happening with a lot of my friends around me, because as you move into your 40s and 50s, you'll see people that are making a lot of money that work for somebody else begin to lose their job. So you can talk about friends losing their job and saying things like, hey, imagine if you lose your job and you have 5,000 people on your list who are your ideal client. How hard do you think it's going to be to find another job? Probably not that hard. Or you can do what I did and start your own business, because now you've done the hardest thing that you can do in an organization. You've learned how to market and you already know how to sell. And those really are the 2 hardest things that you do in an organization. Now, as the side note, I left the church construction company that I was working for because I knew they were struggling. They knew they were struggling to stay afloat. And I started my own consulting company. And when I walked out the door, I had about 1,700 pastors because we were selling to churches. And by the way, those 1,700 people are what allowed me to start that consulting business and actually earn a living in that first year. So let me just tell you, I'm not just telling you that this would be a good thing to have. I'm telling you, this absolutely worked for me, having a list to start my business with. So let's talk about stage 2, indoctrination. Now, you'll notice this says indoctrination and not introduction. I like indoctrination more for this stage because it focuses on the prospect, whereas introduction tends to focus on me. So indoctrination, here's what it means. You start laying the foundation for your relationship with your prospect by demonstrating that you're credible. So we want to show them relevant information about ourselves. You don't want to go off all over the place. You want to show them specifics about your life and your experience that are going to be beneficial for them in moving to the next stage or taking the next step with you. You want it to be brief. I only share with you what is relevant to what I'm about to teach you. I'm reinforcing that idea because it's so important that you don't go in a dissertation trying to prove yourself. By the way, at this point of the process, you should know how to connect with your attendee or your avatar because you've spent so much time developing that avatar. You're going to know what's relevant for them. So you should be able to keep it brief. Now, in indoctrination, you're also going to start seeding them with an alternate and desirable future. So at the top of the webinar, I talked about my vacation with my family being one of the first ones I'd been on where I wasn't absolutely consumed with work. That is an alternate and desirable future for a lot of you. The reason I put that in there is because I know what it's like to wake up every day grinding and then to try to take a vacation or try to take a Saturday off even and not think about work all the time. And I think that's relevant to most of you who are on this call today. I also did this when I talked about making offers on the thank you page after you register for a webinar. What I'm doing there is I'm showing you a better way to generate sales by creating self-liquidating leads. So I'm seeding there some knowledge that you probably didn't have before you got on this call, that's basically indoctrinating you to the idea that I really do know what I'm talking about. I've got some experience with this. Now, seeding doesn't just take place in stage 2 indoctrination. You can actually do this throughout the training. In fact, your training probably does this inherently, because if you're really doing a good job of training people, it'll be obvious that you know what you're doing. But think through the seeding and how you're going to say things and what those things are going to mean to your potential clients. The last thing in the indoctrination stage is results in advance. Here's what that means. You want to show people that you can help them by actually helping them. Your entire webinar, your entire business should be predicated on this one idea, that you can actually help people get where they're trying to go. So let me take a break right now and ask you this. How am I doing at this so far? Are you learning something new? Am I shaping the way that you think about how webinars can impact your business? Am I actually giving you results in advance? I hope so. Now let's move on to stage 3, the actual webinar content. Now, as you develop your webinar, you want to start with a big idea. This webinar that we're in today is all about webinars, but the big idea is the life-changing impact automation through webinars can have on you, your business, and your prospects. The strategy I'm using to demonstrate that is developing a maximum impact webinar. So I'm showing you how to do this. And the big picture is I'm trying to convince you that absolutely you can do this. Now, in this part of the training, we're also going to do something else where we start overcoming objections and start rebuilding belief patterns. So I'm going to do this as I demonstrate to you how to do it. So here's an example. Most people who know what I do would say, wow, I wish I could do that, but I could never do that because I'm not technical. At that point, I ask them to get out their supercomputer. You know, the supercomputer that you keep in your pocket that sends messages around the globe in a fraction of a second, and see if they can search and click. That's about the extent of the technical skill you need to have. That is the building block for building a webinar. Do you understand how that works? So I'm trying to take ideas like that, the objections that people have, and I try to subtly address those objections all through my content. Now, once I have the big idea, I go through a super complicated process that only a genius like myself could do. Here's what it is. I break it down into 3 easy steps. Tony Robbins calls this chunking. You can break anything into 3 easy steps, and there's power in it because it convinces your mind that anything is possible. So to create a maximum impact training or webinar, I've got to do 3 things. I've got to convince you that webinars are good. They're good for you. They're good for your business. They're good for your prospects. Show you what a funnel looks like. To take the mythology out of what a funnel looks like, I need to walk you through that. And then finally, I need to teach you how to structure your training. When we're done with this training today, you're going to have the first 15 or 20% of what you need to be able to go out and do this. If you just take what I'm teaching you right now and walk through this process, build some slides, you're ready to go. Okay? Don't overcomplicate the webinar content part of it. The reality is you know way more about what you do than your customers could ever know. So you can make this something simple. It can seem simple to you, but I promise it could be earth-shattering for other people. Well, this part might just be awkward. Richard, are you about to make an offer? When I started putting this webinar together about webinars, I got to this point and I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? Let me ask you a question. How disappointed would you be in me if I did a whole webinar on selling and I didn't offer you some kind of next step? And by the way, there's absolutely no better way to learn how to make an offer on a webinar than studying somebody making an offer on a webinar. And you're going to get the chance to do that in just a little bit. But before I get to that part, we got a whole lot more webinar instruction to go here. So let's keep going on this. So the offer stack is just like what it sounds like. So if you see my pages across the top here, this is an example of what my offer page looks like. When I get done, there's going to be 4 or 5 offers on here, meaning I'll have my core product and then 3 or 4 bonuses in that. And the way that maps out is I'll have my core offer stack on the first slide by itself, and then I'll dive in and do some details about the core offer. Then I'll go right into bonus number 1. I'll talk about the details about bonus number 1. Now, details can include, here's what you're getting in this training, as well as some of the ways that you can use this. I use the phrase, so you can, a lot in there. So I'm going to give you this so you can. do this. That's going into the time traveling thing again and future pacing what people think they'll be able to do with this or what they should be able to do with this. I'll do the same thing for the third bonus, and I'll do this over and over again until I've got my core product and all my bonuses mapped out. And then I'll put the number out there. So I'll put a number out there, a total value number out there, which is a bigger number. And then I'll ask what if questions. Now, as I'm looking at the training right here, sometimes I switch these two things. I do the reduction of the cost first and then come back in and do the what ifs, because I want to future pace too with the what if stuff or time travel, where we think about what if it only does this one thing, or what if you only got, in this case, what if it only generated leads into the top of your funnel, and so every day when you woke up, you just had new leads in your funnel. Would it be worth it? So that's the whole idea there. These two are interchangeable, and I'll put 2 or 3 questions in there for that, each time highlighting the benefit of the offer so it easily outweighs the cost and benefit. When I do get to the reduction part, with price, that's easy. You just start with a higher number. I usually start with a total value number, cut that number in half. What if it was this? And then I'll go down again. And we usually try to offer just ridiculous deals on things in webinars to get people to take the next step. Now, let me just pause right here and say, if in your webinar, your next step is a phone call or a Zoom call or something like that, you still have to think through the cost of this, the cost benefit ratio to your prospect. Okay, just because you're not charging them something doesn't mean that there's not a cost. The easy one is time. It's going to cost them time. The other thing is, will this be pitchy, right? Most of your people, when they come to a call, they think you're going to pitch them hard. And what you've got to do in the training is assure them that that's not going to happen. Regardless of what the step is, you've got to reduce the perceived cost and increase the perceived value of whatever that next step is. I hope that makes sense to you. When I'm done with the cost, I also do risk reversal right here. You'll see that's on the bottom of the page as one of the closes. But risk reversal is simply this. It's what they get if what you're offering doesn't work out for them. With a digital product, we'll usually tell people, you got 30 days, we'll give you all your money back. And if it doesn't say what we say it'll do, not only will you give your money back, but you can also keep the resources as well, or keep the bonuses. Sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. The bottom line is we want to take all the risk. Risk reversal means, hey, it's all on us. You can come get in this thing, and at the end of it, you can hijack it if you want to and not pay for it and keep the product. Now, here's the thing. Some people absolutely are going to do that. In my mind, those are not the avatar I'm trying to serve. If they want to get it for free, they absolutely can. Those are not the people I'm trying to go forward with. So I'll let them have it. Some people also in the risk reversal will offer to pay their prospect if it's not worth their time. I've seen and heard of those kind of things before. I just don't like doing that, because I want people to want to do business with me when they get on the phone. And if that means I get fewer people on the phone, I'm cool with that. I call those people the gotcha gangsters. And let me tell you, they are everywhere. And I want to do everything I can in my funnel to mitigate interacting with those people at all. So now let's talk about the hook. Now, we've mentioned the hook quite a few times in this training already. Let me tell you a couple of the non-negotiable qualities your hook must have. Number one, it's got to be real value. Don't take back all of the goodwill that you've created up to this point with some sort of gotcha move. Don't be the gotcha gangster like I talked about just a minute ago. We've all had that happen to us where somebody promised us something and then we got it and we were like, wah, wah, wah. Don't do that. Deliver on the promise. It's got to be executable, meaning they can absolutely do it, and then it must stand alone. What I'm going to talk to you about at the end of this webinar, you can do it with the webinar training or without the webinar. You can do it in a very traditional sales funnel. You've got to be able to give real value, or you're going to mess up the goodwill that you've created. Stage 6 is a Q&A. I don't do this every time. Sometimes I do it if I don't feel like I can handle all of the objections and kind of get people to rethink what they're thinking about a subject. I'll come in at the end and I can do Q&A, and that way I can go anywhere with the direction. Now, Q&A for me usually means I go to my database or I go to my inbox and I look at what are the questions that people ask us about this particular product or service. In digital products, especially in the church world, we probably have 7 or 8 of the same questions that are 95% of our customer service questions. So when I'm doing a webinar for pastors for church training, then I absolutely want to make sure I put a Q&A in the end that answers those questions. Now, if your webinar is not live, obviously Q&A is different in a non-live environment. There are webinar platforms now where you can actually answer questions live, even if the webinar is not live. the way I do Q&A is I take the most prevalent questions and answer those to make sure a couple of things. Number one, I want to make sure that we're ending in a timely fashion. And number two, I don't want to get on a live call with somebody that's going to tear apart what I've talked about so far, or challenge it, or ask questions that are not relevant, and try to get free coaching. So I think it's really important that you have a strategy for Q&A if you're going to do it, and if it fits inside the time parameter for your webinars. A couple of things Q&A allows you to do. Number one, it allows you to anticipate objections raised. I just talked about that. It allows you to reinforce your call to action. All through these Q&As, I can say, well, that's one of the reasons we created blank. And then I can say, you can find more information about that at www.trustme.com or whatever it is. That's not a real URL, or at least it's not my URL. And then the other thing it does is it gives you more button time. Some people are going to need a few minutes to marinate on your offer to be able to move forward. And you want to be able to keep the button in front of them below the video in some way, shape, or form, at least for a few minutes. And doing some Q&A adds more value, and it keeps your button in front of people for a little bit longer. And then stage 7 is the recap. So what I'm going to do in the recap is I'm going to hit my offer slide again, or my stack slide again, and I'm going to walk through all of the products that are offered in that, or the core product and all of the bonuses in that. I'm not going to do the deep dive. I'm going to do it from one slide and walk step by step through it. If there are value numbers on there, meaning you're going to get X product and the value of that product is $1,997, I will say the product, so you can do this, and here's the value of that. The product, so you can do this, and the value of the product. And I'll repeat that process all the way through until I get to the bottom, where I'll recap the total price again, and then I'll do the price reduction again. Now, on the price reduction in this one, I'm only doing the biggest number that I started with and the final price, what it's going to cost to get involved today. Okay, so that's it. That is the 7-step webinar structure. I want to finish this segment with a couple of closing ideas or closes that you can use. But in general, that's what you need to be able to pull off a maximum impact webinar. I had a boss when I worked at Smith Barney that said, selling is like shaving. If you don't do it every day, you're just a bum. And to sell, you got to be able to close. So I wanted to walk through a few of the closes that you can add in, not just in the offer stage of what you're doing, but throughout your training as a whole. So let's dive into these. The first one is obvious, more money. But if you're going to do the more money close, you've got to tie that more money to some other desirable outcome. You've got more influence. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get paid in business. One of them is money. One of them is influence. One of them is time freedom. You've got to figure out what it is that your ideal avatar is after and close using the things that are most relevant to them, which most of these closes are relevant to you, the person that's watching this training. The us versus them. In part of this training, I think I've talked about this throughout the training, about what other people do. If I didn't talk about it in the training, I definitely talk about it in some of the live streams or other stuff that we do. Just frustration that I have with other people that are trying to offer you webinar advice that clearly don't have a clue as to what they're doing. That is a common enemy. Another common enemy that I might attack is when people work for a boss that really doesn't care about that person and their future. Oftentimes I've worked in organizations where we had a VP, and I would call him the VP of SP, sales prevention. And we all know what I'm talking about when I'm saying it's somebody in the organization that seems to wake up every day and figure out how they can keep me from doing my job. Well, that's an us versus them close. Here's how you get around that. The principle of the path. This is a big one. And this is a big one for you. It's your direction, not your intention, that determines your destination. That's one from my pastor, Andy Stanley. Let me say it again. It's your direction, not your intention, that determines your destination. So while I'm doing this time traveling or future pacing, I'll get you to dial in on where is it that where you're going is actually taking you. That's called the principle of the path close. The mountain guide. Sometimes things are really, really difficult to do. When I was doing church construction consulting, I actually walked the church through the construction project, and most of these guys had no clue what they were doing. The mountain guide close is me helping them understand they don't really know what they're doing. In fact, I would ask pastors, hey, if somebody on your staff is going to do my job, who's going to do their job while they do my job? Because my job's full-time. And I'm assuming that person probably has a full-time job. So you're going to let them do my job, which they don't know how to do. And then somebody else that doesn't know how to do their job is going to do their job. That's the mountain guide close. Dollars for speed. This is an easy one. If you can spend a little bit of money for speed to market, speed to getting things done, if you can spend $30 so that you, on an hourly employee that allows you to do $500 an hour work, that's a dollar for speed close. That's a dollar for value close, where you say, why would you spend time doing $30 an hour work when somebody else will do that for $30 an hour when you could spend your time doing this? There's a bunch of different ways to use that close. The insanity close, where you just talk about, hey, what you're doing right now, if you keep doing that, that's going to end up here. And that's insanity. I think I've even used that one in this training. The reluctant hero. This is one that I think I've used this from time to time, where I go, hey, I didn't really want to do this, but other people were so bad at this that I felt like I needed to step in and do it. In fact, I might even alluded to that a little bit in the common enemy close a second ago. The investing in a sure thing yourself. So this I do a lot, because I don't feel like, as salespeople, that we spend enough money on ourselves every year investing in ourselves, because we feel like the company needs to do it. Here's how I close with that. Don't let the company spend all the money that you're going to invest in yourself to help you grow to the next level. I was guilty of this, like everybody else is, not taking my own money and making the investment in myself, because the bottom line is this: you don't get a return on an investment you don't make. If the company makes the investment, they don't get a great return on it either, because it's not your money. If you take time to spend your money and your time in a direction, I promise you the best investment you can make is in yourself, not in your 401k or Apple stock or Facebook or whatever it is. The next one is the freedom move close. That's when you start dialing in on there's more to life than just making a few extra bucks. In fact, a few extra bucks is probably not going to change your life a whole bunch. But if you take this next step, you're moving towards freedom. And then you describe that to them. Risk reversal, we've talked about already. That's when you basically say, hey, I'm going to take all the risk out of this for you. Future you now versus you a year from now. This is something I use in my annual review every year. Well, where I try to have a conversation with Richard a year from now. And I try to let that guy tell me, here's what you should do over the next year. So I can turn that into a close by saying, hey, the version of you that's the 2.0 version, when they look back today and they say, hey, here's the one decision you made in the last year that made all the difference. And I try to get them to envision what that decision was so they can go ahead and make it now. And so for some people, that's going to convince them to take my next step. Other people, it's going to convince them to take a next step. Even if it's not with me, it's still good for me. Because remember, this whole thing is about building goodwill in your market and branding yourself for people. Most of the people on your webinar are not going to take the next step today. But if you get them to do something, psychologically, they are going to be in your debt. Then you've got the two choices. The two choices are you can do something or you can do nothing. If you like where you're headed, do nothing. If you want change, if you want more freedom, more time, more influence, more time for relationships in your life, then you need to make a decision. And here's the next step. And then the now versus later. You can do it now or you can do it later. Do you want to wait for the results? That's it. Now, there's hundreds of other closes. You're going to have some that are different from mine because your avatar is going to be different from mine. But this is a good starting point. In fact, this document that you're looking at right here, this is a great place to start when you start thinking about what you want to do with your webinar. Let me pause for a second and ask you a couple of questions. Would you agree it's been time well spent so far? Now, I can't cover everything you need to know in an hour. You've seen we're going really fast. Even if we had all day, we couldn't cover it all. So I'm going to make you a special offer so you can get everything you need to know. And if you act fast, I'm going to give you a very special deal. In fact, the best deal that we're ever going to give on this. I know most of you have the selling part nailed down, but you're going to need some help with pulling your webinar together. And that's why I created the Advanced Webinar Systems Bundle. And by the way, pay attention right here because as I mentioned earlier, I'm still teaching right here. You're going to learn something if you pay attention to how I make this offer. So that's why I created the Advanced Webinar Systems Bundle. So what is the Advanced Webinar Systems? Well, it's a step-by-step plan to create and launch a high-impact automated webinar in just 30 days. I like to tell people it's 1 part theology or the philosophy of webinars and 2 parts technology. And don't worry, if you don't think you're technical, if you can click and type, you can make this happen. The Advanced Webinar System is really 5 courses in one. You're going to learn the skills you need to launch a maximum impact webinar. And by the way, you can use those skills to be leveraged in other areas of your business as well, like training your people. When you get involved today, here's what you're going to get. First off, you're going to get the core product, the Webinar Sales Machine course. The Webinar Sales Machine course includes a step-by-step process to get your first webinar up and running fast. Before we start building your webinar, we're going to get you dialed in on exactly who you want to reach by developing your ideal client avatars. Now, this is a great exercise no matter what you're selling, webinars or not. Then we're going to focus on bleeding neck issues. Once we understand that avatar really well, we can start getting dialed in on the problems you're uniquely qualified to solve. Then we'll start building your high impact webinars. Here's the bottom line. You want your webinars to blow people away because it's your brand. Most of the people who attend your webinar, most meaning more than half, that watch your webinar the first time won't move forward. What those people need to know is that you are the expert in your field. So when you follow up later, they're still listening to you. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Then I'll show you how to make offers that get results. We're going to jump in and start building offers that get your ideal clients to take action. If you sell for a living, you've already got everything you need to be able to do this well. I'll show you how to put it together in a webinar. By the way, if your next step call to action in your webinar is a phone call or a video call, I've got you covered. I'm actually going to show you how to automate the entire process from getting the prospect to book time on your calendar to follow-up reminders so you can make sure they show up. I'm even going to show you how to include an automated Zoom room link in that automated process. When we're done with all that, I'm going to show you how to record your webinar, edit it, and launch it in just 30 days. Now, think about that for a second. In 30 days, you could have a webinar that's generating leads that are made up of your ideal avatars who, by the way, are now educated on the value you bring to the table because of your webinar. How's that sound to you? Let's keep moving. Now, if you sign up today, you're also going to get bonus number 1, which is the webinar email machine. The webinar email machine includes email templates for the entire funnel. Now, do you know why I included this? Because I love selling, not writing sales emails. These are emails we had a pro copywriter create. You can take the templates and change the language to fit your offer, plug them in, and let them run. You're going to get the invitation emails. You may not have an email list right now to send invitations to, but as you start running webinars, you'll build a list. These are the emails that you'd send to your list to get them to join your webinars. You're going to get confirmation and reminder emails. Now, the confirmation and reminder emails, if you don't know what those are, these are the emails we send right after somebody opts in, and then in relation to when their webinar is, we'll send them reminders. These are huge. We use these as an opportunity to indoctrinate people into our culture, our tribe. So we're trying to add value to people with every email. This is a good place to do that. It does a couple of things. It gets them ready to join your webinar, reminds them what the webinar is about, but more importantly, it will increase the number of people that actually show up for your webinars. You're also going to get the follow-up to attendees. So these are the emails that go out to people that actually showed up for the webinar. And then you'll get the follow-up to no-shows as well. Now, in the process, this is where those fit. These are the emails that go out after your webinar to reinforce the webinar offer or drive people who miss back around to the opt-in page. And then last, we're going to give you our 4-day money machine email sequence. Now, the reason I'm throwing this in is because we almost always use this a week or two after our webinar. This is a 4-day email sequence set up to get people to engage your next action. Now, we send these out sometimes a week or 10 days after the webinar, but you can literally send these anytime. You might use it to get people to buy training, schedule a phone call, or sign up for an event. You're also going to get the webinar video editing course. Now, this course includes the best software to capture and edit webinars. You're going to need to be able to capture your screen with your presentation on it. There are quite a few options out there. I'm going to show you the best ones to use to get it done quickly. I'll show you how to edit for maximum results. I always tell people, you know, I'm pretty good selling face-to-face, but with great editing, I am literally as good as it gets because I can do it until I get it right. How would you like to know that you nailed it every time? That's what I'm going to teach you to do with these webinars. I'll teach you where to store and host your videos. And then I'm also going to show you how to set up your Keynote and PowerPoints. I'm going to show you some hacks with that. And then we're going to give you some templates. There's a tricky little way to set up these software programs to make recording a webinar 70, 80% easier on you as you record them. I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm also going to give you my PowerPoint and Keynote presentations to get you started, because there is nothing worse than staring at an empty presentation when you start this whole webinar process. Then I'm going to show you how to use video to scale your business. You can use it internally. You can use it with your clients. By the way, by now, I hope you're seeing what I call the Mr. Miyagi method. Side note here, if you remember the movie from the 80s and then it was remade years later, Mr. Miyagi was teaching his student how to paint the fence and wax the car. And the guy was like, man, I want to learn karate. I want to learn karate. And then one day he shows him, hey, this whole time I've been teaching you karate. Well, the Miyagi method when it comes to webinars is, as you build your first webinar, you're going to develop some skills that you can use in a ton of different ways in your business. In fact, that is the real game changer here. All of the skills you're going to use in your business and learn, being able to take those and literally morph them into anything you want in the business. In fact, there's rarely a day when I'm not using screen capture to document, share, post, or teach something to my team or our tribe. Bonus number 3 is the Facebook ad funnel builder that you're also going to get when you sign up today. Now, a side note, in my business, if nothing else happens today, we'll be running Facebook ads to webinar opt-in pages, and I'm going to teach you how to do that as well. The Facebook ad funnel builder includes the Facebook ads account setup. I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to walk you through how to set up your first ads, how to track your ad spend. The whole point is to put $1 in and get a couple of dollars out. Along with the email templates and presentation templates I mentioned earlier, I'm also going to give you ad copy templates for your Facebook ads as well, just to get you going so you can get to market with your webinar fast. Then I'll show you how to source the graphics for your ads. You're going to need those for your ads. Let me wrap the Facebook course up by saying this. A lot of people tell me, Richard, my prospects just aren't on Facebook. Let me show you some stats. I pulled these today from Zephoria. 2.27 billion monthly active users, MAUs, on Facebook. You also get 1.15 billion mobile daily users on Facebook. Here's the bottom line. If your people aren't on Facebook, it's because they're dead. You can stop trying to target them. Okay, let's keep moving. You're also going to get bonus number 4, the one-time offer course. Now, this course is built around one thing: generating self-liquidating leads for your business, meaning you generate leads and revenue at the same time. This was a game changer for me. In this training, I'm going to show you how to make one-time offers on the thank you page of your webinar opt-in form. The goal here is to offset your paid ad spend. In my first year doing this, we offset more than 85% of our ad spend with a simple $47 offer. The one-time offer course will walk you step by step through how to make offers to offset your ad spend, what you should offer, when you should offer it, and how to create an online mini course. That's right. You're actually going to learn how to create an online mini course to sell. Then I'll show you how to host, sell, and deliver it. And as always, I'm going to give you the PowerPoint and Keynote templates for this. Again, I'm trying to give you everything you need to get you past that 10, 20, 30% mark and get you rolling with a lot of momentum. So here's everything you're going to get when you get involved today. You'll get Webinar Sales Machine, the course that's going to teach you how to build and launch your webinar. That's a $2,497 value. You're going to get the Webinar Email Machine, which is all of those templates and shows you how to build the automation around your webinar. That's a $1,997 value. We sell it on the site for that. You're also going to get the Webinar Video Editing course. That's a $997 value. You're going to get the Facebook Ad Funnel Builder. That's everything that I've learned over the last 7 or 8 years building webinars, using my own money to drive people into those webinars. That is a $1,997 value, and that is massively undervalued at that price, I should tell you. And then lastly, you're going to get the one-time offer course where I'm going to show you how to create self-liquidating leads for your business. That's a $2,497 value for a total value of $9,985. Now, you can see why it's a good deal at $5,000. In fact, I have paid $5,000 for training that didn't cover half of what I'm covering here. And by the way, that training was totally worth it. But if it's a good deal at $5,000, You can see why it's a great deal at $2,500. But it gets even better than that. If you get started today, you can get the entire Advanced Webinar Systems bundle for just one payment of $997 or three payments of $397. All you got to do is click the button below or go to advancedwebinarsystems.com and sign up today. Now, as you're doing that, let me ask you a couple of questions. If all this training did was educate your prospects before you get on the phone with them, would that be worth it? If all it did was help you make one additional sale. Now, I don't know what your sales are worth. For me, when I was doing the church construction consulting, a sale might be worth a couple of $1,000,000. Now in my coaching business, it might be worth $10,000 or $20,000. The bottom line is one sale. If this got me one extra sale, absolutely I would do it. In fact, this is the course I wish I'd had when I started this whole process. And I have taken all the frustration out of it for you and put it into this course. Would it be worth it if all it did was generate leads into the top of your sales funnel? If you're like most of us who are selling high ticket items, consulting, coaching, speaking, you know that your income can fluctuate greatly. The reason that is because you don't have a steady stream of leads coming in the top of your funnel. So if all it did was generate more leads in the top of your funnel, would that be worth spending $997? I think you'd agree with me. Absolutely, yes, it would. And all you got to do to get it is click the button below or visit advancedwebinarsystem.com to sign up now. Now, let me tell you what our guarantee is, our 30-day money-back guarantee. If during the first 30 days you decide the Advanced Webinar System bundle is not for you, we'll refund your entire investment, no questions asked, and you're going to retain access to all the bonuses mentioned above. There's no contracts, and you can cancel anytime. Let's be honest, it's a digital product. If you want to take it and not pay for it, you're going to be able to do that anyway. I want you to give this a shot. So go ahead and click below or visit the website now. I hope to see you in the training very soon. Okay, let's dive back in now and let me give you the hook. I've been talking about it all this time. Now I want to play it out for you. So this whole thing started with a series of problems that I had when I was selling high ticket church construction consulting. Here's what the problems were. Number one, it cost too much for us to get a client. When I was selling church construction, we were spending almost $30,000 to get a single client. And that process was quickly putting us out of business. In fact, the whole journey of automating my sales funnel started in a sales meeting in Pittsburgh. And I said, hey, I think we need to find a way to get paid the first time we go on site instead of spending all this money flying around seeing everybody. And one of the other sales guys said, you'll never be able to make it happen. And I thought, man, you don't tell rednecks they can't make something happen. So I went back and I began to design this automated process where we add value to people on the front end, and then they're actually paying me the first time I come on site. And absolutely, it worked. The next problem is the first step is too big a step. The first check the church wrote us when I was doing church construction consulting was $50,000 or 2% of the total project budget, whichever one was greater, which is a lot of money for anyone, especially for a church, a minimum of a $50,000 check. Now, for some of you, $10,000 may be too big a first step. You've got to take a step back and really ask, is the first step too big? And is that prohibiting you from getting into a relationship with people? The third problem was until they sign something, I'm just a sales guy, right? When I get the signature on the dotted line, I switch gears and now I'm their guy. I'm their consultant. We've all been on the sales guy side of the fence and we've all been on the consultant side of the fence. Here's what I'm saying. Let's jump the fence in the process as early as possible and start being the guy or the girl and start consulting, ideally from day one. And then the last thing was I'm selling to someone who has to sell me. That was a big problem. Let me tell you what that means. I spent 18 months working with a pastor, getting them ready to build. Now, working with them meant giving them information. It meant playing golf, buying meals, doing all that stuff. So when I walked into a meeting, this guy introduced me, and I'm going to tell you exactly what he said. He said, this is Richard Chansey. He works for Kogan. He's a great guy, loves Jesus. It's $50,000 to get started with him. Richard, why don't you tell him what you do? And I'm sitting there thinking, that is the worst introduction I've ever heard. The guy led with the money. Needless to say, a bunch of arms got folded right after that. I did not get that job after all of that work in the sales process. And I walked away and really I was irritated, number one. And number two, I started to think about what just happened and realized that is happening every single time that I sell somebody that's got to go in and sell a very technical consulting project. I coach them. They come back and say, good dude, it's 50 grand. So I realized I've got to do something to mitigate that problem. And you do too. So here's the bottom line. If your first step is a big one, maybe you can break it down into some smaller steps to win the relationship first. So let me break this down for you and show you how I do that. If you remember on the front end of the training, I said I'd give you 2 things you can start doing today to get more sales in your business. Well, now I'm going to show you what those 2 things are. So remember our webinar structure from the earlier part of the training. So in my webinar, my call to action is simply this: I'll work for you for free. Well, Richard, I don't want to work for free. Me either. But let me just tell you this. Chances are you're already doing this. You're doing it as a part of your sales process, gathering information, qualifying the leads, building the relationship, all that stuff that you normally do for free. Now we're just calling it out. I'm going to work for you for free, because as a consultant, you do a lot of free consulting on the front end. Now, the 2 big things that I added to the process are this. The first is a memorandum of understanding. That's a fancy way of saying an agreement between us. This is a document they sign acknowledging the agreement that I'm going to work for them for free, but they're also going to give me a certain amount of information. And I outline that information in detail in this memorandum of understanding. And it says, I'm going to work for you for free. Here's all the stuff you're going to give me. And then a lot of times what I would have is, this was before technology was as prevalent as it is now. I would just have the pastor take a picture of that with his cell phone and text me back. I did a couple of these things unintentional, but that was a really good idea, it turns out, because now I have the pastor's cell phone number, who most of the time in a church was the key decision maker, followed by a team of people. Now, I want to point out here too, this is a turning point. This is where I hop the fence from sales guy to be the consulting guy. There is something about people signing on the dotted line that changes their posture towards you in this whole relationship. Even though no money has changed hands at this point, you're their guy, you're their girl. The other thing I added to the process, so that happens on the very beginning, the memorandum of understanding. That's my call to action. I'll work for you for free. Here's the next step you take. Fill out this document, text it back to me. You tracking with me? Okay, the other big thing I added to this was a State of the Union. I did this by accident, everybody. I put this as the capper on the end of 30 days. And when I did the first one, I thought, oh my gosh, this was unintentionally brilliant. And here's why. You remember that story I had about the way the guy introduced me? So that guy actually had been pre-selling me the whole time and then kind of set me up wrong. The bottom line is this: I am setting up during this 30 days. Now, with church construction, we're talking about millions of dollars worth of revenue to my company. So it made sense for me to spend time with a lot of people on that staff. And what I would do is not only interact with the pastor, but all of the other pastors that were underneath him, getting details, getting information, building relationship with all those people. And then the State of the Union, here's how I would say it. And I would outline this entire process on the webinar. I'm going to work for you for free. At the end of that 30 days, I'm going to give you a State of the Union that tells you where you're at in relationship to being ready to build a building. That was a lot of information that I gave them. The first time I did this, the State of the Union took about 45 minutes. The pastors asked questions for 3 hours. And I did not realize how awesome this was, because now, instead of selling the champion who's got to go back to the church or to the organization and sell, you can sell right to the people that are making the decision. That's a game changer, kids. If you're not wrapping your mind around that, you need to. That is a big deal to be able to get yourself in front of those people. I did it on a video call. This was a few years ago when I started doing this, and all that technology wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now. In the advanced webinar systems, I'm going to show you how to build all this. I'm going to show you how to automate the whole flipping thing, right? And you're going to get a copy of this memorandum of understanding. I don't know if I said that in the offer or not. But this document, this memorandum of understanding, it's nothing special. I think it's a paragraph or 2, but I'll give you my example of it so you've got a framework from where to start. So let me show you how this played out in my sales funnel though. Before I started doing this, our traditional model for trying to get sales was we would generate a lead, and along this path right here, with all of the leads that we generated to be able to get a sale, we'd spend about $30,000. And we're always driving to this 50K or 2% of the total project budget. That was my sales funnel before, trying to keep up with stuff. You know, in sales world, you've got a CRM that's got all of your contacts in it and your tasks are just stacking up and you're not really efficient about follow up and all that kind of stuff. I automated all of that, right? It wasn't just costing us a lot to get the business. It was costing us a lot of business doing it this way. Then I transitioned and started thinking through, what does this look like in an automated fashion? So then we said, okay, we're going to go from lead, instead of trying to go for the sale, we're going to webinar. So we're going to get these people on a webinar, educate them, which is ultimately going to terrify them, because I've got story after story, and you do too, about people who try to do it themselves, or they hijack somebody else's process and try to walk through it, or they listen to the wrong people, and there's just terrible information. In that webinar, again, my call to action is the memorandum of understanding. This is work for free, WFF. Now, I also want to point out, I was doing this with a webinar. You can actually do this as a manual process too. Instead of going for the throat and trying to get the sale, just tell them you'll work for them for free, whatever that looks like for you. That might be a 1 hour conversation for you, or it might be, here's a profile that we can give you on your business. Here's an assessment that you can take. Whatever that is, get them to take the next step so you can start doing some coaching or consulting with them. Tracking with me? Okay. Keep that in mind as we move through this. In the webinar, it was the MOU, the 30 days, I'll work for you for free. Now, I'm doing two things here. I'm gathering a boatload of information in that 30 days and really qualifying the opportunity, which, by the way, I'm doing from my house. Now I'm not on the road all the time dealing with people that could be legitimate leads or they could be fakers. And the second thing I'm doing, and I can't stress this enough, I'm building a relationship with key influencers, because now I'm on the side of the fence where they don't have their guard up. I'm not selling anymore. Now I'm doing some real consulting, and then I'm driving to that State of the Union. Now, I've explained what the State of the Union is. Let me ask you a question right now. Could you absolutely do a State of the Union for most of your prospects right now today? Could you dive in and do that with them? You spend 30 minutes on the phone asking them questions and then turn right back around and say, hey, let me tell you where you're headed. Could you do that? Most of you could do that. And by the way, I do those all on video calls now. I do them on Zoom, which I show you how to do that too in the Advanced Webinar Systems bundle. The next thing is the call to action from the State of the Union with everybody on the phone is the next step, which is I'm going to come spend 2 days on site with you. At the end of that 2 days, you're going to have a plan to get you into a building, and that's $3,500 plus travel. Now, after that, the next step is my 50,000 or 2%. Okay. So look at everything that I put in the funnel here. I put in a webinar, a memorandum of understanding. I'll work for free for 30 days. That State of the Union, where the call to action is the $3,500 plus travel, and the 50K. By the way, I am talking about this entire process, even in the webinar. So I'm telling you, I'll work for you for free. If that works out well, then we'll go to this 2 days on site. I promise I'll get you a plan that will get you into a church, or you don't pay. If you feel like it's a waste of your time, you don't pay, and I'll even cover the travel. Because dang it, by that time, I was doing that anyway. We were covering a boatload of travel to all these churches anyway. So I'm really not risking anything. And then I tell them what the next step is. It's the 50,000. So they need to know, ultimately, we're trying to get over here to the green square. And I needed to make sure through this process that people weren't just using me up to the $3,500 point, because I'm really making my money in that green square on the right side in. The good point is, or the good thing about this whole process, even if they ditch me at the $3,500 plus travel or after the State of the Union, at least I wasn't out 30 grand. In fact, we were in the money a little bit. Now with mine, I actually told them at the $3,500 level, if they decide to go to the next level, I'd give them a little bit of discount on that. Again, that price reduction. I go, hey, instead of 50, let's do 40. And I'll also knock off what we've charged you so far for the vision planning days. So you need to map out your funnel like this. Now, even if you're selling a $10,000 consulting gig or coaching, what can you put in your funnel that allows you to work for free, which is really the work you do anyway, trying to get a client. Okay. And just to cover this one more time, maybe I'm beating a dead horse, but I wanted to show you what I tell them I'll do and what they do, just so you've got a clear picture of what goes on. And some of this ain't going to make a hill of beans to you, but the first thing is a space allocation assessment. You don't need to know what that is. It's super important to a church, because I can scare them to death about overbuilding in one area. And like, you know, in churches, there's worship, children's space, and parking lot space. Well, if you build the worship and the children's ministry space, but don't have the parking to support it, then you wind up spending a lot of money and it looks like you don't know what you're doing. So those are the kind of things that I'm offering them in the training. I'll do a financial analysis for them, which is, checking up on their P&L and their balance sheet, which you'd be surprised how many organizations don't have a clue about that. And then I'll do the State of the Union for them. And then what they'll do for me is they're going to sign this MOU. They're going to give me financial documents. They're going to give me their current schematic design that allows me to do my space allocation assessment. And then they're going to bring their team to this call at the end. And again, now I'm teaching and taking questions from the entire decision-making body. There's no more of this. It's going to cost us 50 grand. Here's Richard. Take it away. There's none of that. Okay. Hopefully that's valuable to you. Again, this is a great addition to an automated webinar, but you can just as easily dive in and start doing this in your business today. You can make this on the back of a napkin, write it out, and just start selling it. That's absolutely what I did before I put it in a webinar. I got on the phone with the next guy and go, hey, let me tell you what we do now. I started selling everybody I was on the phone with 30 days free, 30 days free. And then we'll go to the $3,500. I'll come out to you. We'll spend some time together. By the end of that 2 days, you'll feel like we went to high school together. And then I tell them that, hey, what we're trying to get to is this planning agreement and the whole thing. And we had another agreement behind that for construction. Map it out and roll this into your sales language today. Okay, that's it. Thanks so much for hanging with me. I just wanted to remind you, if you get involved in the advanced webinar systems, you're going to get the webinar sales machine, the webinar email machine, and all those templates I talked about. You're going to get webinar video editing. That's going to change your business. I promise you. For videos that you put out to the world, to the ones that you put out to your team, from the ones that you take on vacation and edit those things down and create lifelong memories. It's Miyagi skills, friends. You're going to get the Facebook Ads Funnel Builder course, as well as the one-time offer course that's going to help you develop a self-liquidating lead system. All of that's a total value of $9,985, but you can get it for one payment of $997 today, or just 3 payments of $397s. All you got to do is click the button below, or go to advancedwebinarsystem.com and sign up. And if you do, I am looking forward to being on this journey with you. I'm actually pumped. I know that there's very little that I could teach you that will change your life in the way that this course will change your life when you execute on creating your first automated webinar. Thanks so much for being with me. If we can do anything for you, just respond to any of the emails that we've sent, or you can email me at support@richardchansey.com. Thanks so much, and I will see you on the next webinar, or hopefully inside the Advanced Webinar Systems program. Thanks a lot.